I'm Becky Hadley, and for those of you who don't know me, my company Headstrong is a PR consultancy with a big emphasis on road transport and safety. I'm really pleased that PACTS is using this conference to look at speed, and it's of great interest to me because I find that the use of language in the media is particularly interesting when it comes to speed. Let's go and have a look at a bunch of clips that I've collected, really vaguely under the headlines of bad, really bad, and occasionally not too bad. I haven't come up with the answers, but I'm very pleased to say that active travel campaigner Laura Laker, who works also or writes frequently for The Guardian, she will follow me up, and she's put together the road collision guidelines, so she'll give you a little bit more. So, does language in the media matter? Well, I was struck by the words of Chief Constable Jo Shiner recently, and she said discussions about speeding, and in particular the way in which the police enforce the law on speeding, often descend into arguments about being just a little bit over the limit, or the speed camera location, or whether the drivers were properly warned in advance of speed detection operations. We don't have these sorts of conversations about whichever way you want to look about it is nothing's changed. When it comes to speed, there's this inherent belief that drivers can uniquely decide what speed is acceptable. This is an old one from the 1960s. I think some of you may have seen it before. At the time, there was a trial to limit the speed of vehicles on motorways to 70 miles an hour. And the trial was made permanent 2 years later after, and surprise, surprise, big reduction in the number of crashes. This is a BBC report filmed at the M1 services at Newport Pagnell. Some people clearly didn't like the new limit.
Hello.
Hello.
You're here to protest, are you?
Yes, we are.
Why?
Well, because I think it's stupid. Very stupid.
What's stupid about going at a safe speed?
Well, it depends on who's driving the car, whether the speed's safe or not, doesn't it?
I drive a lot each year. I drive about 24,000 miles, and a lot on motorways. And it's quite ridiculous if you're expected to sort of dawdle along at 70 miles an hour.
How fast have you been in your car?
I've had it up to about 115.
By the time the organiser, Graham Arnold, rose to speak, nearly 500 had gathered round his sports car.
The British motorist has got fed up with being pushed around by successive governments, not just in terms of speed limits and parking restrictions, but in terms of tax on petrol, tax on motor cars, and all the petty privations that have been put on us as motorists over the years.
So there we go. Just goes to show there's nothing new, and that includes Newport Pagnell services, which hasn't changed very much either. Back to the present, let's have a look at some of the more lurid language in many sections of the media. Daily Express, pretty reliable for colourful anti-restriction driving language. Here with reference to ludicrous speed limits, and the BBC jumps on Penny Mordaunt's quote as being absolutely insane. And of course you can quote somebody else because you can use that judgment, but of course it gets great headlines rather than reasoned critique. Interestingly, they refer here to Wales as one of the first countries in the world, but many of you know that 30 kph is now the default in many areas in Spain, France, Germany, Netherlands, Switzerland and Scandinavian countries, so it's coming. Now, if you have a sensitive mind, well, look away now because I have a flurry of cuttings from The Sun. Ignoring the rather cringy word there at the beginning of braking, rather than actually using your brakes at the top here, this is a camera that can catch you even if you slow down. And not only that, but it appears to have been designed to. So here at The Sun again, and there they use the phrase slapped with fines, and speeding here is incidental and accidental. Drivers are being caught out. If only there was a way to prevent this. Another one here, drivers have been issued an urgent warning after sneaky new cameras could be rolled across the UK. Enough with the Sun, but still with News International and the Times here, but which reports that thousands are snared after a stealth drop in Met Police speed tolerance settings. And this has resulted in thousands of cases. In fact, drop. This triggered a whole bunch of letters in the letters page in the Times. Somebody here was busted for driving too fast, and I respect the law, but where's the common sense in all? Then here's someone who openly admits they can't drive at a safe speed unless they're looking at the speedo. And Richard Curden, Nick Reed, David Ward, you'll recognise this. Again, this is something that keeps recurring throughout this. The cars aren't designed to go slowly, and people can't control them. They pollute more if they're going slowly. This goes on and on through all of this stuff. Next person, the cars drive themselves, and otherwise it's just going to be no fun. It's stultifying as a train and miserable as aeroplanes. And last of all, in those letters, somebody here was subjected to a speed awareness course, and it seems to have had some benefits because they've stopped speeding and they just end up with a queue of drivers behind them. This one in the Daily Mail was quite an interesting one, because this was when Rishi Sunak went full kind of war on motorist, and then our Secretary of State, Mark Harper, then went on a full kind of conspiracy theory, saying that basically there's a whole bunch of cities that are going to ban you from going from one part of the city to the other. And this is all a big plot with 20-mile-an-hour limits as the thin end of the wedge. The interesting thing is that the illustrations used here in the Mail were actually examples of before and after. If a streetscape was ugly and was given 20-mile-an-hour limits to make it safer, and actually the after ones looked so much nicer, I'm not quite sure what their point was. Many of you here will recognise and were indeed involved in the parliamentary group that's quoted here, saying that allowing drivers leeway in implementing speed limits has led. This one jumped out at me here because this is an example of where the driver wasn't actually breaking the legal speed limit, but was still going too fast for the conditions. But what jumped out for me was here that the child collided with a BMW. Again, sort of trying to keep neutral language, but this one just didn't work. At last, some positive view of these things, where speed limits could save hundreds of lives, but even still the new rules are going to hit 8 areas, and then even then the links at the side of the page are all particularly negative, and everyone's angry at the new speed limit and outrage and the war on drivers. At last, a positive, and hurrah for Rob King. This is one of the few positives I've seen. It was an extensive article in the Sunday Times, actually, all about the way that this campaign for 20's Plenty is taking over cities across the UK. And, you know, and it is quite a relief to see something where it's viewed as positive. What I thought was interesting was that with it, the newspaper carried a poll. It's great here to have the high-profile article promoting the work of Rod King. And of course here the Times has decided to carry it out with a typically blunt binary poll. Are 20 limits a good idea? There isn't much room here for discussion, and I think that was seen as well when we saw at the presentation done by Teresa Ciano a couple of weeks ago at PACTS, where she talked about perhaps the quiet majority who sat in the corner and didn't shout about speed limits being imposed, but actually preferred them. Here's a case where I think nearly half of the respondents expressed support for the policy, whereas just over a third opposed it. Finally, at last, a little bit of positive, where speed restraint is being viewed as a positive about saving lives after a string of fatal hit and runs and red light jumping. But it's a long and difficult task. Which leads us nicely to an introduction to Laura Laker, who's taking steps towards tackling the language used by the media.